Good morning. How are you today? I'm gonna pretend like you said, I'm good, and I'm gonna say, I'm good too. Cool. So in this video, me, Alisha Hagen, I am going to show you how I created my rainbow kitty mugs. Delicious. This was quite the process. It took quite a bit of steps and some time, but I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. So enjoy and let's check it out. The first thing I do is grab some clay and weigh it and make sure it's 1 pound 3 ounces, give or take a little bit. All my mugs are usually around 1 pound 3 ounces, and then I'll take that clay and start wedging it. I'll usually wedge it about 50 times. Apparently this might not be necessary because I do grab clay straight out of the bag and it's not full of air bubbles, but it gives me a good workout, I suppose, and then my biceps will be nice and strong. After I wedge my ball of clay, I will pound it into a nice ball. This also helps compress the clay together. Again, I don't really know if this is necessary, but I like having some little perfect balls of clay that are nice and smooth and ready to go. Whack, 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 whack. Oh, how lovely. Then I'll take that ball and go to my pottery wheel and start spinning it around. So I need to center it. Oh my gosh, I'm going so fast. I usually center it by coning up and down. Now here I'm opening it and bringing the walls up. Look at that. That's so nice. Oh my gosh. This is way too fast. This is like 4 times speed or 8 times speed, so don't think I'm actually this fast. It usually takes me like probably about 10 minutes to throw one of these precious mugs. Once I'm done throwing, I will wire it off and move it to a different board. I do have a masonite bat underneath it, which I could just take off and let dry on there, but I'm not going to do that, and usually I throw right on the wheel head, so I have no idea why I'm even using the bats, but that's okay. So I'm bringing it to a different board, and now I've thrown a few. I think I have 7 or 6 there. I'm going to tuck them in for the night under plastic. Because it's really dry where I'm at, I do not want to leave them out in the air because the rims will really become solid. I'm going to leave them under plastic for about a day, so they'll dry a little bit, but they won't dry all the way, and it'll be perfect in about 24 hours. So I'm tucking them in. Good night, my little babies. The clay is officially hard enough to trim, but not dry enough to be super dry. So I'm going to trim the bottoms, but first I need to center it back on the wheel. And I do that by kind of lightly gripping it and pushing it when I feel it's a little off. Once it's centered, I use some little chunkies of clay, little like worms of clay, to keep it on the wheel so when I'm trimming it doesn't fly off. I've seen people not use those, but my gosh, I don't know. That's just what I do. So now I'm taking my trimming tool and some little wet sponge because the clay's a little dry. I'm trimming off just, the excess and then making sure it's still a little wet. And then I want to get the middle to be like open. I want there to be a foot ring, so I'm just trimming the insides there and then compressing it with a rubber rib also. So that's my trimming technique. And I'll keep going until it is good enough and looks, decent. I'll also take my finger and kind of compress it, smooth it out, smooth the rim in case it gets a little iffy from the wheel. And I'm checking it out here. It looks good, and you can see that the foot ring looks decent. So now I can move on to the next step. Now I'm ready to pull some handles while the mugs are maybe under plastic or off drying a little bit more so that I can stick the handles on in a little bit. So to pull the handles, I get a chunk of clay that looks like a carrot, and you wet your hands and you just pull down until you get the shape you want and the length you want. It always looks a little funny, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. So once it's the size I want, I will place it on a board, shape it generally to where it's going to look like what it'll look like on the mug, because I want them to dry a little bit. Then I cut it off and I keep pulling more until I have enough. I'm making 6 mugs, so obviously I need 6 handles, and sometimes I'll make one extra in case one of them, you know, gets a little funky, but here I'm just going to make 6 and leave them to dry for a little bit. Next, I'm using this needle tool to mark where the ear line is going to be, and I'm spinning this banding wheel under it so it'll be a perfect height all around. Then I'll mark where I want the ears to be, and it's really nice using the needle tool because I can easily take water and sponge it off if I didn't like where I put it, and then retrace my lines. So afterward, when I have my good lines, I'm going to take my carving tool, this one's from Diamond Core, and start carving the lines out to make a nice thick groove line that separates the cat's body from the edge where I'm going to put glaze and where you drink out of. The first time I ever made cats, I added ears to the top, but you know, when you drink out of it, they poke you in the face, but with this design, the ears won't poke you in the face when you drink out of it. Now I'll do a quick wipe with a very soft sponge just to get any little pieces or sharp edges out of the ear line area. So I want them to be nice and smooth. Yes, smooth those babies out. Smooth, smooth, smooth. I like using this Mudtools sponge a lot when I'm smoothing any part of the clay process. It's a great sponge. Now I'm going to mark the center where the handle will be based on where the middle of the ears are. So I do a little tick mark and then take a scoring tool and scratch up the surface where I'm going to attach the handles. I gotta make sure that little tick mark there is wiped away too. This is going to be my slip. It is just little bits of dry clay and water mixed together. It'll make like a glue so that I can attach the handles. Now the handles are dry. I can pick them up without them bending weird. And then I do trim off the little edge of the bottom of the handle because it's a little hard. Then I'll also score or scratch where the attachment will go onto my mug. So by scratching both surfaces, it makes kind of like a Velcro effect where it will just dry within each other and be less likely to come off. Now I'm adding my slip to both the handle and the mug. I'll try to get a generous amount. It doesn't look like I even added enough here, but usually I do a bit more so that when I push on the handle, there is extra that comes out of the sides. I will use that extra when it dries a little bit to smooth out the areas of the handle. So I gotta make sure it's pressed on really well without altering the mug shape. And then here I'm just using my lovely soft Mudtool sponge to maybe make it a little smoother. I'll usually leave the mugs to dry just a little bit longer so that the slip that I've attached is a little harder for this cleanup process. I like to use this tool that has, I don't even know what it's called, this little scoopy side and a needle side. So the scoopy side, I will push the slip clay inside to compress it. This will help not have any cracks in my handle. I'll spend a lot of time doing that. And I'll use the needle tool to get into those little areas so that it's really well cleaned up on the inside seams here. Okay, now we're going to speed some things up. On the bottom part of the handle, I will spend much more time smoothing it and blending it so it looks like it's actually coming out of the mug. The top area doesn't have to do that because it's supposed to look like a cat's tail that's curled. So the bottom, I'm taking a sponge and my tool and really just keep on smoothing it until it looks a-okay. This takes quite a few minutes. This is why it is in fast mode. This is a silicone tool that actually, I don't really like using it, but I was trying it for smoothing, and it's okay. I just prefer my fingers and the sponge. Now I'll take my mugs and leave them overnight under plastic so that the clay body and handles dry evenly and there's no cracking. The next day, I am getting my underglazes ready, and I'm using these Mayco fundamentals in rainbow color order. So I will pour out some red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and those will be my colors for my rainbow cat mug. At this point, I just need to paint on the stripes of colors. Now, I've seen people use spray or airbrushing on colors, but you know, I'm not that fancy, so I'm just going to paint on the rainbow stripes. I will eventually be painting on 4 layers of these colors, and this is just my first pass, so I'm going to make them pretty stripy before they turn into a gradient. I'll start blending near the end, but really there's no use in blending the first couple pass layers of the underglaze because you're not really going to see that blending work anyway. It just takes a little longer. So I'm just making these basic stripes and also painting the bottom. I do eventually also do the foot ring because underglaze does not stick to the kiln. Now we're speeding it up way quicker because this process takes me about an hour to do all 4 layers and it's very time consuming. Hey look, it's me and I keep painting and painting and painting. This takes forever. Usually with a single colored cat, it takes a lot less time because it's just one color. So here is my last layer of underglaze painting. I am finally trying to blend and smooth out the gradients so that the color transitions aren't as harsh. I want it to really look like it's a fading rainbow, so it looks beautiful. And it is almost done. I'm almost done blending these colors together, and that is exciting. Then I'll let it dry just a little bit so it's not wet before I sign the bottom. I've been signing the bottom just with my first name. Some people use stamps, some people paint with underglaze. I just carve out my first name on the bottom. I could do it differently. I've thought about it, but I kind of just like it like this. Now I'm going to make the faces, and I gotta be honest, this is my least favorite part of the process. It's very fiddly and very small, but I do like how I make the 3D faces, so I'm just gonna do it. I gotta deal with it. Some parts of the process are not gonna be your favorite, and other parts are going to be way cooler. So here I make 2 little spheres, and I smash them down into pancakes to make the little cheekies, and then I make a nose. I've transitioned to make noses into little hearts because I think it's adorable, and they're usually pink noses, so I will use this needle tool to form it into a nice little heart nose. Fiddle, fiddle, touch, touch, smooth, smooth. That's all this really is. Now I have the cheeks and the nose. I'm going to make a bottom lip, and I do that by making a little wormy shape. It's just a little wormy. And then I'll put the little wormy underneath and use that extra wormy clay. Look at that cute little bottom lip. Oh my goodness. I'm going to use that clay to smooth all the pieces together and blend them into one mouth nose piece so they're not all separate. I'm using that scratching tool to kind of move the clay all around, and then I blend it and smooth it. Once the mouth and nose is done, I need to add some eyes. And this is where it's a little tricky. I have to get 2 exactly equal balls of clay to do even eyes. And I'll usually just do this by feeling the clay, and I can tell if I need a little more or I need to pinch off a little less. I wish I had some kind of measuring device that would measure this small amount, but I just gauge it by my own guesstimate. Once the little balls are pretty even, I smash them down into little coin-like things, and they do dry pretty quickly, so I add some water and smooth out the edges because that is where it cracks the most. Now my fiddling is complete and I have 2 adorable eyes and a cute little nose and mouth that is ready to attach to a mug. Okay, next I'm going to score or scratch my mug with a needle tool about the general shape of the little cat mouth. So I will either kind of gauge the size or kind of put a mouth on top to see where it's at. Then I'll add my goopy glue slip stuff, you know, the wet clay to make a glue, and I'll put some on the back of a mouth. I didn't show it, but I also scratched lines into the back of the mouth because, you know, it makes that Velcro-like way of working. Here I'm pushing it on gently but firmly so I know it'll stick, and just kind of fiddling a little bit with the sides. I don't want the slip to goop out too much on the sides, but maybe just a little, and I'll end up smoothing this out when it's a little drier. For this mug's eyes, I actually decided to turn the circles into jelly beans because I don't know what I like better, the circle eyes or the jelly bean eyes. The circles are like surprised eyes and they can be cute, but the jelly beans are more suspicious, and I wanted to go jelly bean with this one. So I'm going to scratch into the surface for the eyes just like I did for the mouth. Get the general size of what the eye is going to be and scratch, 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 scratch. Obviously, you know the drill. I got to scratch the back of the eyes too. Then I'll add my slippy slip. Now I'm trying not to add too much because I don't want it to ooze out the edges too much. I just want enough that it'll stick together really well. When I push the eyes on, they do always end up a little bit bigger than I made them, which is perfectly fine because big eyes are just so cute. Now for eye number 2, doing the exact same thing, adding a little slip to the back of the eye, adding a little slip to the mug. Looks like I need to scratch more, and then pushing on the adorable little jelly bean eye. Once the face is done, I'll spend just a little bit of time smoothing out any areas I need to smooth out. I'll use my needle tool, the scoopy part of the needle tool, wipe off any excess clay or slip that may be smushed out. You can see here there's just a little bit. I'm just cleaning up the areas. This is probably my most favorite blending tool, is this pointy paintbrush. I will dip in water and just go around and smooth out with a little bit of watered paintbrush. And it looks good. Now it's time to carve the fur. This is a pretty relaxing step in the process because it takes about 15 minutes to carve the entire thing, and I just like the feel of carving out clay. I have to make sure it's also not too dry at this point, because if the clay is too dry, it'll be much more challenging to carve the little marks out in a clean way. I'm using a carving tool from Diamond Core here. I don't usually use this tool, but I figured it might work pretty well, and yeah, it works pretty well for what I need it to do. I'm making a radial pattern on this cat, so I start at the mouth and then I go around and around, and eventually the little marks become little horizontal lines and they do even out to be kind of a straight lined pattern. I used to do it in a different way, but I really like the radial pattern of carving the best. When I'm done carving, I'll brush it off just to get any extra little clay pieces or things that I missed off of the cat. The last step before I put this in the kiln for the first time is going to be underglazing the nose and the little eye pupils. So here I'm using a Mayco's Fundamental Blush color for the nose, and I'll add 2 to 3 coats of this Underglaze to their cute little heart noses. I am also going to use Mayco Fundamentals Black, the jet black, to paint the little pupils. And I try to very carefully make these into perfect circles. I'll do each eye, wait for them to dry, do another coat, and then maybe another coat. It's usually 2 to 3 coats of the underglaze for the eyes. With this underglaze, I usually do need 3 coats. Sometimes I'll make the pupils look to the right or to the left or up or down. But these ones, I decided just to keep them straight ahead, looking like a little surprised kitty. I now have 7 rainbow cats finished in their clay step stages. So at this point, I need to load them up into my kiln so they can have their first bisque firing. This is going to be a lower firing so that the clay can just solidify a little more and it'll be much easier to glaze. I'm making sure that they are carefully put in because when they are dry like this, they are very, very fragile. Now they're all loaded and safely in my kiln, I can start firing it. For my settings, I choose a cone 05, which will be 1,887 degrees. The kiln has to fire all the way up to that temperature, takes about 8 to 9 hours, and then it'll cool down before I can open it. That takes maybe another 12 hours of waiting, but you don't want to open it when it's too hot. It is all done, and it also says it took 10 hours and 1 minute. That's because I had it on a slow speed instead of medium, but it's all good. And they look pretty perfect. They look just like when I put them in, but now they are a little more solidified and a little less fragile than when they were just bone dry clay. I like to rinse my bisqued clay stuff when they are out of the kiln. I know there's kind of a debate on whether it really helps or not. I just like to wipe off a little of the dust. Plus you can kind of see how vibrant it is when it's put in water. And then once they're all rinsed off, I will let them dry for at least 24 hours because I want to make sure they have no more moisture in the clay. It is glazing time. I'm going to use this clear from Mayco. This is a brush on glaze. So I'm just going to take a paintbrush and paint it all over the rainbow parts of the cats. I'm using kind of a small brush, but that's okay. So this brush is good because I can just smash it into all those little nooks and crannies that I carved out. And I'm going to make sure I do 3 coats of this glaze. That's what I found has been a good consistency once they are fired. So I'll do 1 coat, let it dry, paint on it, let it dry, and then paint on the last coat of clear glaze. Then for the insides, I've chosen to do a white. I'm using a Stroke&Coat glaze from Mayco, and it's going to be kind of a white glaze. I figured something that's not going to detract from the rainbow, and white kind of reminds me of clouds. So I'm painting the edges and the inside of the mugs. I'm also going to do 3 coats of this glaze also. Now it just looks like an all white cat until it's fired again. Now they are completely ready for their final glaze firing in the kiln, and I'm really hoping they will be as beautiful as I hoped. For the moment of truth, the rainbow cat mugs. The first rainbow. Okay, so the colors are a little different than I expected. I still like it, but the colors are slightly, like these cool colors are just a little different than what I thought it would be. We'll check out the rest. Still cute. And then the last 2. that concludes how I made my rainbow kitten mugs. Like, this one has actual coffee in it, so I'm gonna keep drinking it. They are microwavable. I've put it in the dishwasher multiple times, and you can have one of these bad boys from my Etsy store. I think I only have a few left, but yeah, they're so cute. Whoa, my coffee. Okay, bye.